Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, what the hell was that? If all scoring,
Jesus Christ.
If all scoring plays are reviewable, I'm stealing this from the mailbag. If all scoring plays are reviewable, why the hell aren't safeties?
Okay, I don't know that safeties aren't reviewable, but the problem is what is reviewable, right? So if, for example, on a scoring play, there was offensive pass interference and it wasn't called, then a review of that scoring play would not produce it because offensive pass interference is not a penalty that you can add in review. Face masks are also, according to what people told me in the broadcast, because I had it muted, are also not subject to review, which is insane, frankly.
Just absolutely ridiculous. Look, the reason why the Vikings lost tonight was because of the Vikings. But the fact that you had a face mask that close to an official whose job it is to see that sort of crap is unexcusable. And tomorrow morning, the refs are going to say, we're sorry, we missed that. Sorry. That ended the game. That mistake that happened 6 feet from his nose, really trying to keep the iTunes rating intact here.
Right? This is real tough.
This is just, I'm not shilling tonight. We're going, this is the episode. We're in it. This is ridiculous. The NFL tomorrow morning is going to say, our bad. We're sorry that the game ended like this. And it's infuriatingly stupid. The fact that this happened and I don't know how you missed that. And of all people, J.J. Watt tweeted out tonight that the refs can't see this 6 inches from their face. Meanwhile, they want to judge a hip drop tackle in real time.
Ooh, boy.
Come on.
He's coming in with some heat. For J.J. Watt, that's pretty explosive.
That was absolutely ridiculous.
So, obviously the refs missing it is a huge problem in and of itself, right? I don't want to downplay that is insane that they missed it. If you see someone's head turn 90 degrees, right? You can't do that on your own. You need assistance.
Yeah, as it turns out, if you watch the play, the defender even put his hands up onto his helmet because he knew he messed up.
Right?
He knew that he had messed up. That's what's going to be 15 yards.
That refs will call pass interference when DBs they don't even see it, but they see the defensive back just go whoa, and I feel like the same principle should be at play here. So that's bad, right? That's all bad. I don't want to downplay that how bad that is, but also the fact that it's not subject to review is wild to me. So obviously the final couple of minutes you can't challenge, but the idea. So last week in the mailbag, someone asked what the replay assistant thing was about, right? And I brought up, hey, I actually remember what I said in the podcast. I brought up that it is designed for quote unquote objective plays on video. So you cannot apply them to subjective penalties like pass interference or whether or not, a completion is a result of a catch or if the receiver was, bobbled the ball or lost control or whatever, right? That is... those are judgment calls, right? That's what the replay assistant is for. I don't understand how. So there's a 2024 clarification of this rule that argued that the replay assistant can be used on roughing the passer penalties, which would then put it into that category of objective, right? I don't understand why that would not be objective. That is a face mask penalty is okay, obviously everything in football is subjective and objective is just about where you draw the line. That is clearly behind whatever that line should be. That is insane to me that face mask calls are not reviewable. So I was on a live stream during the game. It was the Shipcast. It's Pete Overzet over with Underdog Fantasy. And we were befuddled, baffled, right? That's why I had the broadcast muted because I was on this thing. And it doesn't make sense that is not something that you can discover upon review, right? Like I don't understand what would prevent that from being in that category of reviewable. And so someone in the chat suggested that, well, linemen get subject to face masks all the time, and so making it reviewable would be tough. First of all, I actually don't think that that's the case. I think that's like a fair thing to bring up, but I don't think that that's actually true, because contact to the head area as a defensive lineman to an offensive lineman is already illegal. It's not like holding in the same way to me. But even so, you can't just make it reviewable for like ball carriers, right? And that resolves that. And what in the world, right? I can't. I don't have words for how screwed up. Again, I'm trying to keep the iTunes rating. How screwed up that whole process is, because that is like a career-ending. The reason that's a penalty is because you can end careers on it. You can twist someone's neck. So it's a 300-pound dude twisting a guy's neck. That's it. I don't understand that. That's crazy to me. So Byron Young is going to receive a fine, and it'll be totally worth it because it won them the game, right? And you're right that like the Vikings, heading into that drive, they had like a 7% chance of winning. Obviously, the Vikings lost the game because of the Vikings, but it would be inaccurate not to call that a game-winning play, right? That sealed the game for them.
Absolutely. Like there was nothing left to play for after that. You could walk off the field. Vikings had no timeouts. They onside kicked it far
by the way,
up into the sky.
Yeah. That was, I know that Kyron Williams caught, but like, what an incredible free kick. Oh my gosh.
That one, if that was in Dallas, that would have hit the board. That just kept going. And of course the camera angle was nowhere near where it should have been. I was thinking because it's a night game and they always do shots of the moon, which they didn't in this game for some reason, that would be a perfect time to just kind of suggest that it hit the moon. Goodness. Yeah, that one, I honestly, I lost track of where it was coming down. Like when somebody like fell down on the, oh, okay, it got caught. But like it had like the most hang time. It was glorious.
Yeah. and like that is the most infuriating thing because they just have to get it right. But the Vikings really screwed up that game. Yeah, like the second and third quarters were inexcusable performances from a team that has reset our expectations of them, right? That we have an understanding now that this is like a 5-1 team, that's a playoff quality team. So they should do better than what they did against the Rams team, which admittedly this Rams team is better than a 2-win team should be. That's the danger going in. Well, especially now that they're healthy.
Yeah, that was the other thing, as somebody who, and we put out the preview on Wednesday afternoon. This was short turnaround, short week and everything. As someone who listened to the preview, I gotta say, Joe McAtee was off on a number of different things there, especially the, Puka Nacua playing or not, Cooper Kupp playing or not, and that offensive line for the Rams not being terrible. It turns out that I don't even think we touched Matthew Stafford once during the game.
Yeah, I had the over on Jonathan Grenard sacks because I was like, well, bad left tackle. Jonathan Grenard's going to be there. They're going to get a ton of pressure. So according to ESPN, they had only pressured Stafford on 3 of his 34 dropbacks. PFF has it at 4 of his 34 dropbacks. That's close enough in agreement for us to say that is crazy, 11% or less, right?
How?
9 to 11% pressure rate. With a blitz rate of 44%, right? Like they were sending people, right? Yeah, and the thing is, some of it's that Stafford's getting rid of the ball pretty quickly. He had 2.52 seconds to throw in this game. So he's getting rid of the ball pretty quickly, right? That is an adjustment that they made to the offensive line. We discussed this in the interview where I was like, well, if they don't have the receivers healthy, how are they going to adjust the offensive line? Well, they did. They did have the receivers healthy, right? Puka had an outstanding game. Part of that is because Stafford got rid of the ball really quickly, because those receivers got open really quickly. That's the fundamental kind of answer to this kind of defense. It's not the answer the Lions had, right? That's been discussed. But the traditional or classic answer to this style of defense would be a pretty quick passing game that takes advantage of these blitzes. And you need receivers to be really good in the short area and get yards after the catch. Well, that's exactly what the Rams have invested in over the past couple of years. And they were healthy. Puka Nacua wasn't just active, he was dominant. And so part of that is Stafford's getting rid of the ball quickly, especially against these blitzes. On a blitzes, he got rid of the ball in 2.48 seconds. So that's part of it. But you need to get, that's not enough. That's not enough of an answer for why you only have an 11% pressure rate in the game. They didn't play well against one of the worst offensive lines in the league. That's brutal. You can't do that.
Someone just tweeted out, Sam Darnold was not in a legal guarding position. Oh, that's crap. Well, all I want to do is talk about the defense right now. We'll discuss a bit of offense in a bit, but let's talk defense, because you were right. They were sending blitzes. They were not able to get to Stafford. They occasionally caused him to rush a throw, or caused him to throw much, much, much higher than he would have liked.
Right.
That was my favorite. That was my favorite Stafford throw of the day. But for the most part, he was able to march down the field unimpeded by this makeshift, by this supposedly good Vikings defense. Not makeshift, supposedly good. And man, it was every time Puka Nacua caught the ball, I wanted to throw something. He's infuriatingly good, and he wasn't even supposed to play today.
Right? That's like the most frustrating part about it. So I will need to look this up later, but I don't know how many games have existed in like the history of EPA per play that we have, which I think goes back to 96. I'm not confident, but how many individual games we have where the quarterback has thrown at least one pick and also has over 0.5 EPA per play. 0.53 in this game, which, by the way, for context, is a 95th percentile outcome. That is like getting a 140 passer rating, which I don't know what his passer rating actually was. I'm sure it was lower than that because of the pick. It was 124.5, so it wasn't that much lower. But that's like getting a 140 passer rating when you throw a pick. Like that is a crazy performance to have. You can't, it's one of those examples where you can say outside of the pick, right? Like you can just say, well, besides that, it was pretty good, because it was outstanding. Stafford is a really good receiver, or a really good quarterback, sorry. And has been putting together all these underrated seasons in Detroit, finally gets his flowers in Los Angeles. And this is why, with a makeshift offensive line, with a defense that honestly is just which actually Sam Darnold played really well. But the defense is honestly just not put together. It's an outstanding Stafford game. And the Vikings defense, there's no words, man. That's upsetting.
While you try to get your composure, I think that moving forward, I've got an idea for Thursday night games. I think that the rest of the week, Monday night should be normal. Sundays, even the occasional Saturday and Friday, they should be normal. Thursday night, we should really just treat like it's a Japanese game show.
Yeah.
I feel like we could have more fun with it. The games are not good. Or the games are the worst team tends to do much better than they should. And I don't know if it's like statistically, if that's just because of less lead time or whatever, but we should do a thing where, everybody has to do something incredibly weird before they score, or instead of an extra point, you have to eat a part of a live eel or something. You just make it as weird as possible and make it so that's the thing that you do on Thursday nights. That would make things infinitely more watchable. I would, you know what? If I was sitting there and I had to watch Sam Darnold sing something before he threw a forward pass, I would tune in for that, and I would be fine with the whole losing thing. Be like, well, what can you do? It was Thursday night.
Right. Yeah. He had to grab the eel, man. It's just tough.
Yeah. It's and then the extremes close up part. Be fantastic. We're having karaoke contests instead of onside kicks. It's great. But just like that form of weirdness. God, every time Puka, and like, that was one of the other parts, is that at one point during this game, and I love Harrison Smith. I fully believe Hall of Fame quality safety. He's having he's doing well this year. I'm enjoying watching him play. What the hell is he doing 40 yards back covering a wideout? And the only reason why that wasn't a touchdown is because it was overthrown.
Yeah.
What is he doing out there alone?
This was a pretty bad game for him. Just like, I think it's probably going to be his worst game of the year. This was a pretty bad game for him. There's a reason that he got. Would he lead the team in tackles? It's either him or Ivan Pace. But that he got as many tackles as he did. Usually it's because he's really good at stopping the run. He's getting into the backfield, and he did do a little bit of that, right? He did do some really great stuff against the run, especially a tackle for loss or two here or there, right? He's always going to have a couple of those. But a lot of it's just he's floating a little bit too deep in his zone, and then he's catching up to it by making a tackle. I think he did that with Puka Nacua specifically twice. And you're right. He was out of his landmark on what was just an overthrow. Stephon Gilmore had a pretty bad game, right? Which it would have looked worse had Tutu Atwell caught that pass. Harrison Smith, actually Josh Metellus had a pretty good game. Andrew Van Ginkel was relatively quiet. Obviously, he was really big on at the end of the game when he got that tackle of Kyron Williams. Would have been nice if he tackled him out of bounds. Kind of difficult for him to control that, so fair enough. But yeah, that was defensively, that there was like a lot of just missing moments, right? That you would totally expect a defense of this caliber, including some of the talent that we've seen perform well this year, just, like I said, miss, right? Like Grenard actually did have a pretty good game outside of not being able to get to Stafford. Like he was winning off the snap and pass rush. They just weren't turning into pressures. That's fine. Byron Murphy had a good game. Ivan Pace had a really, really good game. But we didn't see anything good from Harrison Smith or Stephon Gilmore. And when you put, your defensive backs on islands like that, which, it's not man-to-man coverage. Maybe it's a quarter zone. They're essentially on islands. They're handling a lot of this stuff on their own. Well, you've got these rush packages put together. You just need consistently good games from people like Gilmore and Smith. Never mind the fact that they're both going to the Hall of Fame. That's not even what I'm talking about. They're put into positions where their responsibilities require them to do a lot better than they did in this game. In fact, I think it's probably those two that, where defensively where had they performed up to their level, that would have been maybe not an easy win for the Vikings, but that would have been a pretty clear win for the Vikings. They wouldn't have had to deal with this face mask stuff in the end zone. Like that was really upsetting how those two played.
Harrison Phillips, I take it back, I don't think he got touched. Harrison Phillips had an opportunity to sack him, and
how did he get out of that?
Through his fingers. The famously mobile Matt Stafford.
I don't even know.
The most vanilla of Vic.
Yeah. Don't know what that's about. I don't know how he didn't complete that one. Maybe he's not used to getting to the quarterback like that. So he doesn't have a bunch of sack finishing reps in his repertoire. But that would have been nice to have the one Stafford sack of the game, which, it is kind of uniquely annoying to not have Stafford sacks. If there's one thing the Vikings have done against Matthew Stafford over the years, it's bring him to the turf, right? Like that's the one thing they've been able to do consistently, and they couldn't do that this game.
And I'd love to take the defense off the field here and talk about offense, but unfortunately they committed another penalty. So we're going right back to the defense. The third down penalties that this defense put on today, was it 5? Was it 5 times that they were going to get off the field and then they couldn't because of a third down penalty?
Yeah. I think it was 4 or 5 because they had 7 total penalties, one of which was declined. And it was 2 on Byron Murphy, 1 on Ivan Pace. We have 1 on Shaq Griffin, who also actually had a bad game along with Gilmore and Smith.
Yep.
And then Gilmore and Ward I don't actually even remember Jihad Ward's penalty. But yeah, Gilmore and Ward each had a penalty. So, great. fantastic. Good work.
Just
God, that Byron Murphy pass interference was. And it like, I probably would have called that illegal contact downfield. Like I wouldn't have called that pass interference, but that is just stupid. Like you can't be doing that. And the guy that's passing you is not even like Metellus is rotating over. You're just passing him off at that point. He's not in your, so you don't need to do that. Like when it's a pointless pass interference, that's like that feels worse.
Oh, of course. Everything on that sort of thing, or like when the ball is clearly not catchable. Catching the pass interference on those is the absolute worst, because you're just sitting there like, really? That's the one you're going to call?
Yeah, it was brutal.
So the corners didn't exactly have a good day. I know this because at one point, Harrison Smith was out there alone in the end zone, 40 yards from the line of scrimmage. Goodness. But they were able to pick off Stafford on an overthrow once. So good.
Good job, Byron Murphy, on being at the right place, running the route for him. Right?
Maybe it's just an Amazon thing. I don't think the other broadcasts do this nearly as much. But they might as well have had a picture-in-picture of Byron Murphy the entire drive. Like when the Vikings got the ball back on offense, they kept cutting back to either the front or back of his head.
That was really weird. Yeah.
They just kept doing that. And after a while, like, I don't know if you're just like, is there a reason that and like, even Jenna tonight was like, why do they keep showing him? It's like, oh, why are they showing him a third time?
Yeah, I don't get it. Like, he was targeted 5 times. I mean, Harrison Smith was targeted 6 times. Stephon Gilmore was targeted 8 times. Like, he wasn't targeted a ton. He didn't have like a ton of tackles. I did take the over on his tackles. So what was it? 3 solos, 1 assist. I think I hit the over. But yeah, he didn't have a ton of tackles. Sorry, I'm in this brain space. He didn't have a ton so I have no idea why he's not like the most expensive player on the team. He's not the heart of the defense or anything like that. That's obviously Josh Metellus and Andrew Van Ginkel. I don't know. It was weird.
I enjoyed that despite all of that, the Vikings didn't give up a ton of yards on the ground. So there was that. If nothing else, during the fourth quarter, they were at least able to like stop it. But this was
at the beginning, Kyron Williams like rattled off a couple of big runs, and then then they closed down on it. They prevented him from getting to 100, which kudos, I guess. I don't know, like congrats. So there's that, I guess. But that's for whatever that's worth. I'll take a look at the EPA per play on the run game. So EPA per play rushing minus 0.14, which is in, I think, the 40th percentile or something like that. So they had a better than average day on defense against the run, which is fine. A lot of that's Blake Corum. He really screwed up his very few, his 4 rushing attempts. But yeah, I mean, they did okay. They got into the backfield a fair amount in the second half. But yeah, that's like a saving grace kind of thing. Or it's not a saving grace kind of thing. It's like I guess, kind of like, here's your cookie. you gave up 30 points. Here's a cookie.
I mean, technically it should have been 28, but
right.
Yeah, that.
Well, the defense only gave up 28.
Oh, so okay. Well, that's fine. Good for our defense.
Here's a cookie.
Here's a cookie. Let's talk offense, and the first thing we have to do is talk about Christian Darrisaw. That didn't look good. Do we have
an update on that?
So from the presser, it said that it was a knee injury. They'll know more tomorrow. That was from Kevin O'Connell during the press conference a few moments ago. So there is that. That injury took place on a play that you couldn't kneel, which is the frustrating part. You couldn't kneel at your own 3. You did have to run a run there. You did have to run a play of some variety, and that happened to be the one that knocked out Darrisaw's knee.
Yeah, and he got rolled up on. That's just is bad. I mean, it looks bad. It's one of those things where it could turn out to be the case that it looks a lot worse than it is. But they did rule him out really quickly. So, which is generally not a good sign. I don't want to like read the tea leaves too much into, proxy figures like that on something as big and as critical as that. But yeah, you'll be evaluated further tomorrow. I think keeping our fingers crossed that we get some positive news. Yeah, sure, fine. The fact that it's not instantly diagnosable, I guess that's a good thing. But yeah, we'll see. That one's tough. He was having a truly phenomenal season. Like I know that let me take a look at his PFF grades, but I know that by the numbers, it wasn't as awesome as, I've been trying to indicate. But it really has been, like, you take a look at what they're asking him to do and how he's performing. It really has been just an incredible, incredible year. Maybe the best year he's had. Let's take a look.
While you're looking that up, Art But Sports just did just did the face mask as well.
Oh my God, I'm gonna have to take a look at that. This guy's a gift. Jesus.
I just sent that to you in the chat. Yeah, that's remarkable.
Oh my God, this is so good. How does he do this, man? I still can't get over the time he did the Shannon Sharp IG Live one. That's like peak. That was next level.
That one was uncomfortable for everyone involved, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, Sedersaw ranked 9th in PFF grade. It's actually higher than I thought. But yeah, he was having a crazy season because they were asking him to do more than you'd expect a traditional left tackle to do, even a high-level one. They were putting him on an island. They were splitting him out a little bit wider, giving him much more of a responsibility. They slid away from him a lot. They gave him isolated looks. They made sure that, he was widening the edge rusher, which is always a pretty difficult task. They didn't give him tight end help or anything like that. And he was going up against an outstanding resume of pass rushers this year. So huge loss. And then that's just pass rush. I mean, his run blocking was out of this world. This sucks. Hopefully he'll only miss a game or two. I don't know. We just don't have enough information to suggest whether it's like no time missed or 2 weeks missed or the rest of the season or designated for return or whatever. We just don't have enough, but it's pretty bad if you don't have them.
Yeah. The fact that he did not come back to the sideline was good. We're going to be going down that road, aren't we? Little early for this. And if we're talking about offense, I want to talk about Justin Jefferson, not just that amazing catch that he had near the end of the game, which, holy crap. But they went early and often to Jefferson to the point where I was sitting there going, are they going to try to break the record for most receptions by a receiver? Like, are they going for the Brandon Marshall?
Yeah, because what was it, 3 receptions in the first drive?
It's like 5, yeah, like 3 in the first drive, like 5 in the first quarter. Like, okay, let's do this. You know what? It's on. I don't care if they just dink and dunk. Let's Jay Cutler to him the entire game. Let's just do it. Let's just make this a thing. Let's break the record. It's like 20 or something like that, if I remember correctly. I might actually have to look this up because it was like Brandon Marshall.
Set against? I was about to say, was it set against the Vikings?
It was not. Oddly enough, that was one of the few records that was not set by a team against the Vikings.
21 catches versus the Colts on December 13th, 2009.
Yeah.
And then we got Terrell Owens with 20. Keenan Allen with 18 is third all time. That was against the Vikings.
Yeah, I bet it was.
That was... like, I remember that game. That was last year. That was it was not bad. But yeah, I was like wondering if it got close to that Keenan Allen game and actually, or rather if Keenan Allen got close to that game and actually turns out he did. Yeah, it seemed like Jefferson might have been on the path to hitting that pace, but I mean, it's slow. You can't be that upset at his receiving volume. Even if you take that first drive away, he still ends up with, 5 receptions over the course of the rest of the game. I'm not upset at his target volume, given that he had there were 25 passing attempts. And again, you take that first drive away, there's like 20 passing attempts. So 5 out of 20, that's not like a bad target volume for him. But when it was working, I don't know if the Rams defense was like, we didn't set this up right, and changed the way that they handled the defense. But if that were the case, I think we would have seen a little bit more volume from Jalen Nailor, Jordan Addison. And obviously Jalen Nailor dropped that one. That could have been a touchdown. That turned into a field goal, I want to say, on the Jalen Nailor drop. Jordan Addison also had, I think the one target to Addison that wasn't a completion was like a really weird Sam Darnold. Like, what are you doing? He was escaping pressure, but it felt like he was like throwing to the 3 Rams defenders instead of Addison, who also happened to be in the area.
Like afterwards, you just sat there like, what? Who was that target?
What was the goal here?
Yeah, who was that actually going to?
Well, remember the thing about Sam Darnold. He's going to do something stupid every game. I'm glad that was the one. At first, I thought it was him taking a sack in the end zone. I was ticked off. You watch the replay, and actually he had moved up in the pocket and had gotten past the defense. Like, he'd gotten out of the grasp of what a defensive player would be able to do. Were they following the rules? So I actually am not now upset. Like, probably throw the ball away, but given how he actually had managed that pocket, it's not as bad as I initially thought. So there's that. But yeah, that's the stupid thing he did. The Vikings overcame it because he didn't throw a pick on that play, which is great because he's been throwing a pick, I think, in every game or something like that. And I took the under on him throwing picks because I was like, that can't sustain itself, and it didn't. I feel good about it. But you'll do a stupid thing every so often, but you end up with like a 27-yarder to Jefferson, a 25-yarder to Aaron Jones, a 25-yarder to Josh Oliver, of all people. 2 receptions this game, 1 for a touchdown. Well-designed touchdown. But I think we got to get to the point where we start asking about kind of the difference between scripted plays and the rest of the game, and whether or not our perception of the Vikings being really good in the scripted portion of the game, like they were in parts of the Kirk Cousins era, and then kind of collapsing a little bit in other parts of the game, whether or not that is something that we still believe to be true. Because right now, it very much seems like the Vikings are somewhat reliant on making sure that script executes correctly. And they're better than other teams at it, but they need more when they get out of those. Oh, for people who are unfamiliar, by the way, this is particularly true in West Coast offenses like the ones the Vikings run, but teams will often, especially on offense, but usually offense and defense, script the first couple of plays for a couple of reasons. One, to take advantage of very specific defensive tendencies they see that will probably be erased by the time we get to the middle point of the game. And then 2, to introduce some variance in the way that they call plays. So the fact that it's 3rd and 7 doesn't change the play call. So what you typically do on 3rd and long, your scouting report's not going to be helpful here because we're just calling whatever plays on the script. And then also you can look at what your tendencies are and then script plays away from what your own tendencies are after you do some self-scouting. And it's really difficult to call against your own tendencies during the game, which is one reason that script is in there. And Bill Walsh, I don't know if he invented it. A lot of apocryphal stories suggest that he did, but certainly he established it as an effective offensive strategy and pioneered a lot of its usage. And it seems like the Vikings are really reliant on that. It'd be really nice if they kind of found a way out of it. Yeah. It'd be nice if someone asked a question like that. Now that I'm no longer in the press room, now I just got to be passive aggressive about it.
Yeah. Well, at least you get to play to your strengths.
Right.
The Vikings scored 14 points within the first quarter. And then the second and third quarter were bad. And second quarter in particular, if I remember correctly, it was either 7 or 8 plays total in the entirety of the second quarter, which is almost inexcusable for a team that has aspirations of being, more than just the last wild card selection.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they're gunning for the number 1 seed at the moment. Obviously, now they're tied with the Packers in the division, but that's the goal, right? When you're 5-0, when you're 5-1, when you're 5-2, that's the goal, is to be the top seed. Let me take a look at the quarter by quarter breakdown because we've got the PDF at NFL GSIS. That's first half of just first quarter play calling. Okay. I wanted the first quarter statistics. What are you guys doing?
They are trying to mess with you.
Great. Thank you. Mission accomplished. All right, I'll just open the first quarter summary. So we've got time of possession in the first quarter, 10 minutes to 4:58. That's incredible. So the Vikings had 10 rushing attempts and 8 passing. So they had 18 plays in the first quarter. In the second quarter, they had 2 rushing attempts, one of which was a Sam Darnold something, and 5 passing attempts. So they had 7 plays in the second quarter. So it was like 18-7. Third quarter, they ended up having 7 rushes, 7 attempts. So 14 plays. This isn't including any sacks. So oops. So 1 sack. So they did have 8 plays in the second quarter. You're right. And then the fourth quarter, they had 3 carries, 5 attempts, 2 sacks. So 7. So they had 10 plays in the fourth quarter. So yeah, the second quarter didn't have that many plays. The second and third quarter have been difficult for the Vikings. Someone had asked a couple of shows ago, like, hey, is there a problem with the third quarter of Kevin O'Connell? And it feels like it goes all the way back to the beginning of the O'Connell era, where the third quarter has been a bit of a problem. One issue is that Stathead, who I love and who kind of sponsored me, I got a nice little shirt from them too. I don't know why you all
be little. You're
that.
like 7'3". I don't.
Right. Well, I can't wear it. They just gave me. Yeah. But
it's your towel for when you're working out. I get it.
Yeah. When you look up like quarter differential splits, they used to have that at Stathead. In their revamp, they got rid of it. I did submit a ticket to them. I was like, hey, I don't know where to find this. I know that I was able to find this before. I don't know what's going on. But it was in the last game, actually, during the Lions game, I was like, because they had a really good first quarter, and I was like, oh, is there going to be a third quarter collapse? That might be part of a story I write. So let me look up what the third quarter stats are for the Vikings. So I'm looking around Stathead, they don't have it. I gave, because there's like a Discord for creator feedback, and so I was like, okay, hey, where is this? And they're like, oh, actually, we accidentally got rid of it. We'll fix that. So that's going to happen soon, but I don't have it now. But through other workarounds, I was able to find a point differential by quarter this season. And the Vikings are plus 13 in the first. This doesn't include this game or I think the Lions game. So up until week 5, plus 13 in the first quarter, plus 3 in the second, plus 3 in the third, and then minus 5.9 in the fourth because of garbage time. So not many people are that upset with their fourth quarter performances so far this year. Obviously, this fourth quarter could have gone a little bit better. But the third quarters historically have been an issue. The second quarter here has obviously been pretty stagnant. That's an issue. There's something about getting out of that scripted element, which, I mean, it could be the case the Vikings don't script plays, in which case we have to find another reason that they're very good at the beginning of games, which I don't know yet. But that's something that they have to be more assertive about resolving, because it's been a persistent issue regardless of the quarterback.
PFWA pool reporter Calvin Watkins interview with referee Tra Blake. This happened after this evening's game. Question. On the Vikings' last offensive play, it looked as if the quarterback had his face mask pulled. What did you guys see on that play? Blake. Well, on that play, the quarterback was facing the opposite direction from me, so I did not have a good look at it. I did not have a look, and I did not see the face mask being pulled, obviously. The umpire had players between him and the quarterback, so he did not get a good look at it. He was blocked out as well, so that was the thing. We did not see it, so we couldn't call it. We couldn't see it. Question. Was there a discussion on the field? Because obviously the Vikings were complaining about it. Did your crew have a discussion about, hey, did we miss this, or anything like that on the field? Blake. On the field, we definitely did discuss it because they did bring up a concern. We discussed it as a crew, but we weren't able to see it on the field, so we weren't able to make that call.
The screenshots are really damning because there are at least 2 different screenshots of the broadcast where the referees very clearly have, at least 2 different referees very clearly have a look. One is the head referee, Tra Blake, and the other one is another official who has seemingly done a very poor job of calling Vikings games. Someone had mentioned that this was the same official who waved off the fumble recovery touchdowns against the Colts in their incredible comeback in 22. I don't know if that's true. That's just something that people keep saying on Twitter. But that guy also had a pretty good view. There are moments where Sam Darnold is looking directly at him, which is a problem, right? Because he is behind Darnold. And Darnold, his body is facing forward. And so for Darnold to look directly at him, something has to have gone wrong. And he did not really understand that is probably an unnatural state of affairs for Darnold or any quarterback. But yeah, two referees had pretty clear angles to this. That's kind of screwed up.
Kinda. Just kind of. Sorry. That came up on the timeline because it just got posted, and it's just infuriating. You know what else is infuriating? All of these pre-snap penalties that are really starting to add up, especially the illegal procedure. It's on the tip of my tongue, but when they're not lining up correctly,
shift,
illegal, like when they're not lined up correctly, yeah.
Yeah, so on that illegal shift near the end of the game, the Vikings were moving multiple players around, and so if you're moving multiple players, like multiple players being set in motion, they have to be set for 1 second before you can snap the ball. You can have one player in motion during the snap, but you can't have two or more. So that is an operational error, probably from Darnold. Can't tell for sure, but maybe he should wait a second before he snaps. But that could be an operational error from whoever's doing the shifting, and they mistimed what they needed to do. Still, kind of the buck probably stops Darnold there because he controls when the snap occurs. But if you're low on the clock or whatever, then that's a Kevin O'Connell issue or a player operation issue from the guy who's shifting. So that's another element that you have to pay attention to. I'm trying to take a look at the offensive penalties. Yeah, 3 offensive penalties, 6 defensive penalties, plus 1 declined defensive penalty. Great. Good work. And not a lot of BS penalties, right? Like there was one uncalled penalty we've been focusing on, but this isn't a case where the Vikings got screwed by extra penalties that they did not commit. It was like, yeah, no, that's the penalty. You called it. That was a false start. You got me. Can't do that.
No. Can we just take a moment to appreciate Trent Sherfield?
Yeah.
a name I was not expecting to say this evening.
Right. Just the most random touchdowns. I mean, like, on both sides, right? 2 DeMarcus Robinson touchdowns, a Trent Sherfield touchdown, Josh Oliver touchdown. Like, yeah, why not, man? Whatever. No, but he's been doing so. Matthew Collar wrote a piece and then also tweeted out that Trent Sherfield's been doing a bunch of dirty work this season, and they're probably going to reward him at some point. And I think he tweeted that like earlier today. And so they did reward him. And good job on doing the dirty work. You got your tutty. He's been good. It did kind of undercut my Jalen Naylor props, but that's fine. He's a good player. He deserves to have his flowers and his moments. Good job, Trent Sherfield.
Yeah, that was look, Jefferson didn't get a touchdown, but there were a couple of really fun plays there that ended up working out. And that particular touchdown, you just sat there and went, I actually, if I would have had the depth chart out, I would have had to just double check that. Be like, wait, that really? Isn't he on like special teams all the time? Well, good for him. I do appreciate that. Aaron Jones was cooking for a little bit, including a hell of a catch.
Yeah, I mean, he was a more effective receiver than he was a runner, which I don't think was really on him, especially after the Darisaw injury. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like in total, his contributions were pretty astounding. It sucks that we didn't get mid-game production from him in like the same way, which would have been nice. But yeah, I mean, he had a good game on like in total when you kind of combine it all together.
His pass reception there looked like the one. It looked like the one that Darnold didn't throw last game, which led to the pick.
Right. Yeah.
Just opposite side of the field.
Yeah, he keeps on making plays like he's a receiver. Like he's had a couple this year, like at least 3 this year, where he's catching it like a receiver. Like he's tracking the ball, it's going over his shoulder or something. Or like I thought like that deep one was to Jalen Naylor. He's wearing 33, right? Jalen Naylor's 83. And he gets up and you see his hair and you're like, that's not Jalen Naylor. Then you see the number and you're like, oh my God, that's Aaron Jones. That's Aaron Jones' music. My God. Yeah, no, he's been such a huge asset in the receiving game. Obviously, they're not using him like a receiving back, like Christian McCaffrey, like, throwback Matt Forte. But he has really fantastic receiving skills, and it's good to see.
I keep having this thought, and I definitely had it during the Lions game, and I definitely had it today, that you're not going to be winning these games by kicking. And I love watching Will Reichard go to work, but we're getting to a point now where you don't win friends with salad, and you're not going to win these games with kicking. Yeah,
like the NFL coaches will be pretty positive about finishing a game or finishing a drive with a field goal. And I get it. Right, we've talked about this on the show before, where like if you average 3 points a drive, you have one of the best offenses in NFL history. I get it, right? But the point is that you're not going to do that every drive, right? That you need to score points to make up for the drives where you're not scoring points. And so finishing drives, especially ones that are occurring near the like end of the game, not end, but like near the end of the game, where you're maybe trying to catch up or trying to establish or salt the game away with the lead. The field goals are kind of invigorating for the other team as well. Like, it's not a bad heuristic to like think about how the other team feels about what the conclusion was here. Like, if you go decide to punt for it on 4th down and the other team is really jazzed that you didn't decide to go for it, like that is at least something worth thinking about. That doesn't mean you have to go for it, but it's worth something thinking about. Same thing with like ending these drives and field goals. Like, yeah, Reichard's having a pretty great game, or in a great season. But man, I would like for us to not know that. like I would like for us to be lauding the fact that he's not missing an astounding number of extra point attempts. That would be awesome if we were like, hey man, this guy's kicked like 50 extra points so far and he hasn't missed one. That's insane. And not talk about how like excellent his field goal game is.
Yeah, be like, wow, he can hit it from anywhere on the field. Why do we know that? Well, we keep settling for field goals.
Yeah. So it would be nice if we got a little bit more out of
that. As a side note, Ryan Wright, who was discussed briefly in the preview, was punting like his life depended on it at one point there. There were a couple of really nice long. There was one that was like almost a coffin within the. I think it was within the 5, but they still drove down the field anyway. But that was not Ryan Wright's fault. Oh no!
Right.
he was out there kicking coffins.
Yeah, he on punts averaged 50.3. Didn't allow a ton of returns. I'm trying to think. Yeah, it was 1 return for 4 yards. The other 2 were fair caught. Really good hang time, really good distance. Obviously, the onside was beautiful. I don't know all the words I want on this one. The onside was
I need
art.
Somebody to take a clip of that with like Sarah McLachlan's Angel. Like the ball gets kicked and it goes into slow motion in the arms of the angel.
I mean, it's kind of like Angels in the Outfield where the ball is getting lifted unnaturally for like something's afoot, but you can't see the angel, so you can't really like be mad about it. It was like that.
Yeah, there's no rule. There's no rule that says angels can't play baseball. There's no rule that says dogs can't play basketball.
Exactly. But yeah, long as 61, no touchbacks, all 3 punts inside the 20, 2 of them fair caught, 1 of them returned for 4 yards. Astounding game. Good job, dude.
Yep. Arif called you out. You did well.
Yeah.
I mean, what else do we say about this game other than the word infuriating? This absolutely seemed to me like a game the Vikings could lose. Short turnaround with a shorter week. Lost to Detroit.
Right.
We're going.
That's going to keep coming up. That's annoying.
That's absolutely going to be. And here we are. We have a mini bye. before the Vikings play the Colts. And we get to deal with the fact that the Vikings lost twice in 5 days.
Yeah, I mean, after the loss to the Lions, I forget which player said it. I think it was a defensive player. Might have been like Naylor, actually. But I don't know. But one player was like, I'm glad that we're playing again in 4 days. Like, he wanted to get the loss out of his mouth. Well, I got some bad news. Yeah, you got another 10 days.
Yeah, this is this one's gonna sting a bit. And again, this was not a situation where, like, the reffing aside, the Vikings were in that spot because they were being the Vikings. They couldn't finish. Even the last offensive drive they had that didn't involve a sack or didn't involve a face mask, they settled for a kick. And that's fine, but that's it's frustrating. And I'm not saying that you need to be Dan Campbell, gamble every chance you get sort of thing, but it's becoming a theme, especially against the Lions last game, but this one this one as well. It's getting hard to settle for 3.
It is, yeah. I guess the good news is, and I can say this, the Vikings can't say this, so this is like an important distinction. Now I think the most difficult part of the schedule is over until you get back to the divisional games at the end of the year. So obviously the Vikings could really screw it up and mess up their get right game against the Colts. That is, we all know, that's completely in the realm of possibility. There's no chance that I'm going to suggest that the Vikings couldn't lose an embarrassing game to the Colts, which reminds me I got to figure out who I'm going to get as a guest. If you have ideas, let me know. Who do we get for 22 for that guest? Do you remember?
I would have to check.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, mostly we were just talking about Jeff Saturday, I think. But yeah, the rest of the schedule is not as tough as that. You tell us that, this is a pretty classic in art for sports writers. Hey, if you told me at the beginning of the year that the Vikings would be 5-2 after their Thursday night game against the Rams, you take it every time. That's true. The Vikings did reset the expectations by going undefeated at the beginning of the season. We're allowed to be disappointed. And we're right to be, I think, right? Because that's your teams buy your investment and then they have to make good on it. So that's nice that the Vikings schedule kind of lightens up. They can't treat it like that. They can't look past the Colts, right? They can't look past the Jaguars. They can't look past the Titans. I mean, they definitely can't look past the Jaguars. I know the Jaguars are a bad team, but it's one of those bad teams that's like full of players that you can absolutely see going off. Like you could see Brian Thomas having a great game. You could totally see Travis Etienne having a good game. Obviously, you could see Trevor Lawrence having a good game. Like that's a team that can go off. They've not been doing that, but you got to be careful, right? Because there is talent there. But yeah, they've got, like I said, the Colts, the Jaguars, the Titans, just a bunch of AFC Souths coming up, and not the good one. They already played that one. The Bears, which are looking better than they were at the beginning of the month, they're playing a little bit better. You do have to watch out for that. Cardinals, kind of the same thing, where it's like I'm not calling them a good team, but I'm definitely not calling them a bad team.
They're frisky.
Yeah, they're frisky. Falcons, that's a revenge game. Can't look past that. And then you've got the Bears, Seahawks, Packers, Vikings. So you've got a couple, like 3-4 games here where it is less intense and a mini bye week, like you said. You'll get TJ Hawkinson back probably. Would Hawkinson have made a difference in this game? Maybe it would have been enough to win, right? It's always tough to tell because even though it was a 2-score game, it was really like a 1-score game, if we're being completely honest. And another third down here or something like that, that could have changed things. Just like it definitely could against the Lions, right? So that would help, right? Having Hawkinson back, that's going to be huge. But yeah, now we're not talking about this team like they're a juggernaut. Now we're talking about this team like, a lightly capsizing ship where it's like, well, the ship is probably fine, but we got to address this.
we need buckets. We need buckets and we need time. By the way, the answer to your question is Chris Shepard from Stampede Blue was the Colts guest.
Cool.
Jake Arthur was the one before that.
Oh, I think I asked Jake Arthur last time and he couldn't make it for whatever reason. And then sent me Chris Shepard, which thank you, Jake. Sorry, that wasn't sarcastic. That was real. It was genuine. I know I sound sarcastic all the time, especially when I express gratitude, and fair enough, but that was real. Yeah, okay, we'll probably reach out to Stampede Blue if not. I know a couple of other Colts guys, but yeah, I mean, this if the Colts game was flexed, I still don't understand it. The Colts game was flexed. If they can't, like, it's not just that they have to beat the Colts, obviously they do, and if they lose to the Colts, that's catastrophic. But, like, if they can't put the Colts, like, away, like, if they can't put them to sleep, right? If they're not tucking them in at the end of the game, then we're not talking about that top seed anymore. Now we're talking about, hey, man, who are they going to play an away game against in the playoffs? How is that looking?
Yeah.
And if they lose the game after that, then we're like, oh my God, now we can talk about 2016.
Yeah, because let's be honest, you're gonna need 10 wins this year to make the playoffs in the NFC, and
at least, right? Like
that's what it's looking like. It's also why the Cowboys are not mathematically eliminated yet, but it's pretty damn close.
Yeah, yeah, it is. So I am reminded of the time the Patriots went 11-5 with Matt Castle and missed the playoffs. Okay, so obviously that was a different playoff format. They didn't have the seventh one go in. They would have, right, had there been a seventh. But I'm reminded of that. It may not be enough to get 10 wins. In a 17-game season, even with that seventh seed, it may not be enough given how the top of this NFC is performing, especially in the division. So, like, you don't have games to give up when you're in this particular type of conference environment, and you have the aspirations the Vikings do. You don't have games you can give up.
Well, let's go to a couple of questions that we have in the mailbag. Ingram's chop block asks, "Are we last in the NFC now?" Sorry, last in the NFC North now. Apologies.
They were tied to the Packers, I think, because their losses were in conference. I don't know if the Packers were. Well, let's take a look. ESPN usually has pretty updated standings. I know Pro Football Reference doesn't update them until like 5 a.m. Let's take a look. 5-2. All right, so the tiebreakers, well, they're winning. They're ahead on point differential against the Packers, so they've got that. If the Packers' 2 losses were also in conference, which is a divisional tiebreaker kind of down the line. Oh, Eagles and Vikings. Yeah. Oh, and the Vikings have the head-to-head. Duh. I don't know why I didn't think of that. Yeah, so they're not last place. They're definitely ahead of the Packers. And at the moment, until the Bears play, they do have a better win percentage than the Bears, but the Bears are 4-2. If they're 5-2, the Bears may have a tiebreaker because their losses were to AFC teams, to the Texans and the Colts. So they may have a tiebreaker in that they've got a better in-conference record. So it's not going to matter because these teams still have to play each other for the most part, and the Bears have not had that many conference opponents on their schedule, period, and they're going to come back around to that. They've had like 4 AFC opponents, which is more than anyone else. Like, that's a lot, right? 4 out of their 6. So they're going to have a bunch of conference games coming up, which means the Bears probably have the most difficult schedule out of all of these guys. And they do, yeah. Their
wins are against pretty awful teams.
Yeah.
Which is a fun thing. Nude Egg asks, Vikings offense feels like it's been lacking, but the analysis I'm hearing is suggesting the play calling is good, O-line is solid, QB, running back, and wide receiver play is solid, but the Vikings got 6 points on the Rams D after the first 2 drives. What isn't working?
I'm not confident the play calling is good. Again, tough to be super critical of KOC, who has been a really excellent coach. Sorry, I just got a tweet. Must have been difficult to fly out the crew from the Liberty game on such short notice. That's good. I don't know that the play calling has been extraordinary. I think that they're putting a lot on Darnold holding onto the ball, which Sam Schwartzstein had a really excellent tidbit in the Amazon Prime Next Vision thing. I don't know what they call it. Prime Vision. That's it, I think. On the Prime Vision broadcast. So Sam gets to interrupt like once a quarter and just say some nerdy stuff, which is great. I love it. And his stat was Sam Darnold is like second in the league in time to throw, which is, a product of the offense, but we know it's especially a product of the Kevin O'Connell play calling because he's first in the league in time in pocket, right? So number one, probably somebody like Lamar Jackson, right? Number one is scrambling out of the pocket and buying time. Now Sam is buying time, but I think leading the league in that particular stat is suggestive of what the offensive play calling is. And I think it is a little bit too geared towards finding those explosives. And this is something that I noted, in the Jets game. It's something I had actually asked them outright, like, hey, are you forcing it? Like, you're really aggressive. Is that too much? And they're like, we'll always be aggressive. That's our philosophy. I'm always going to be comfortable with it. It's like, you should probably think about that. You should probably take some like cheap yards sometimes. First downs are good too. Like when you get the lead and you want to march down the field. You don't have to get it all at once. I like that they're aggressive. Teams that are more aggressive on offense tend to be better, but there's a limit. And I think the Vikings have hit it. And I think that that's the issue. The offensive line is net good, but it's impossible for us to say that it is not a problem because you do have the problem with Ed Ingram up the middle. Obviously, again, we've got the Questenberry replacing Darisaw question, but that wasn't like the problem in the second quarter, right? So, I mean, there's that. So that's something. But yeah, the receiver's good. Sam Darnold is pretty good, but it's not like he's good every play. Like he's making mistakes, and sometimes we talk about how he's going to do something stupid every game and you hope it's just the one thing, and in this game it wasn't that many things, but they tend to get localized in the second and third quarter, so that's another element of it. The running game does seem to stall a little bit in the second and third quarter, especially the second. It seems like I don't have the data to back this up, but that is my perception. So yeah, I mean, I think all of those things are part of the reason that we're not seeing the offense clicking as much in the second and third quarter. But I think that's a really good question because we're talking about, a team where we're complementing everything at a unit level or at a position level. And then when we talk about the unit as a whole, we're pretty critical. And we say kind of stuff that's maybe not helpful, like they got to get better, which I said a ton in this podcast. But I mean, not only is it true, but it is good to ask questions like that because it forces us to really evaluate kind of the individual elements that are responsible here. And I think that the play calling in the second and third quarter is an issue.
Let's go to BlackRock Sports Group, who asks, for Arif's, in quotations, B, race corner, there has been a surprising lack of questions regarding B race this season. Have we solved B racism?
Yeah, so I think that's why the NFL removed end racism from the end zones. For those who haven't noticed, they've replaced that with like vote or something about voting, which replacing end racism with like get out the vote or whatever does seem horrifically apropos. I don't love our political system's capacity to solve racism. Let me just leave it there. So voting, replacing that is very funny, but also maybe the NFL wasn't trying to end racism against humans because, they clearly haven't done that yet. But racism against bees. And maybe that's why they were like, hey, bee racism is over. We can just replace that with voting. Vote for more bees. Which, by the way, also bee populations have been recovering for the past couple of years. Good news.
That is good news. Is it just the Italians, or is it like a mix of Russians?
I wouldn't know. I can't tell. I don't see bee color.
Then you don't.
No, it's all yellow and black. That's it. Is that better?
I don't know if it's worse. And on that note, we're going to end because I'm not going to continue the mailbag after something like that. So that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you enjoyed it more than the ending of the game. Hopefully this was a little cathartic. Arif, what do you have to plug?
I don't know if I'm going to write a piece about this game. I'm just going to use this podcast as like that's my post game. So instead, it's going to be that piece on gambling I've been talking about writing for a while. I've got it half written, and then I was just on a gambling podcast or a gambling stream during the game. So that seems pretty appropriate. It's going to be about that. It's going to be a deep dive into kind of the history of how we got to where we are when it comes to sports fantasy and sports gambling. I'm guessing it's going to be 5,000 words, which means it'll probably be 7,000.
Well, your estimations aside, I want to thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Norse Code. We will be back next week to discuss the preview of the Colts game with a guest to be determined. But for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much. And let's just all agree that was a face mask. And we'll talk to you next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif of and he can be found on Twitter at ArifNFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or at my personal account at BigMono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merch. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.